Howdy, 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 and welcome to the Snort Cast. My name is Nguyen, and I'm very excited to have this show on. So thank you so much for joining this show. It's been so magnificent. I'm really excited to speak to this person because we spoke before. A lot of things have happened in the universe, and because of this pandemic, I'm really excited to speak to him about how he has worked in this industry for so many years. But before we jump into that, please tell us where you are watching this show from. Tell us where you're snorting from. The show is called the Snort Cast. If you're watching it live, put hashtag live. If you're watching on replay, hashtag replay. But please tell us where you're watching from. I want to know where this show is connecting us from all around the world. The SnortCast, so what is it? The SnortCast is a show where I interview funny people all around the world, and we talk about the funny, how they became funny, and how they use comedy into their storytelling. And because this show is predominantly on LinkedIn, we're going to find out how you can use comedy in your work as well. This episode is supported by my Patreon. Thank you so much for making this happen. You know, who knew that I could ask people for money? It's amazing. And also, if you want to follow the show, it's on all social medias. It's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Just put in @the SnortCast and you will find us there. So tell us where you're watching from. I'm so excited to have this person on to talk about his work. I've had such a ball with him the last 12 months. And so this is who I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to Peter Helliar. He has been performing stand-up for more than 20 years, was on Rove, and I remember watching Rove back in 1999. I was, Pete's going to hate me when I say this, I was only 14 years old. And I remember watching this religiously because live TV in Australia was just popping. There was Hey Hey Saturday, The Panel, and there was Rove. And that's when you got variety. And that's something that we're missing. And I really want to talk to him about live TV because he's also on another live show called The Project every night on Channel 10. Monday to Friday at 6:30. He's not on every night, I don't think, but he is one of the main hosts on that show. He also has appeared, he has other talents as well. He's created and co-produced 2 series called It's a Date for the ABC TV and also How to Stay Married. And I was honored when he invited me to be on the season 2 of How to Stay Married. That's what a whirlwind. I can't wait to bring him on. But before I do, here is Pete's work. And we're just going to check it out. Here we go.
Thank you very much. This is like a fantasy for me. I'm hosting the All-Star Melbourne International Comedy Festival Gala on a Lazy Susan. Like, I'm not sure where they actually got this. I'm not sure if it's actually been donated by the 21st Century Dance Club in Frankston. Yeah. Or if it's actually Clive Palmer's actual Lazy Susan. I don't know. It's special for me to be hosting tonight because the Melbourne International Comedy Festival this year turns 30. How good's that? 30! So I feel I'm the right person to be hosting because I celebrated an important milestone recently. I turned 40. And it's interesting when you turn 40 because people, family and friends that get around you, they want to make sure you're okay. I turned 40. You okay? I feel like I'm not old. When I was younger, the idea of 40 was very, but now I'm here. I don't feel old. I feel like I'm young enough to know what a selfie is, but too old to kind of completely understand Netflix and chill. I know what Netflix and chill means now, but like 3 months ago, my wife went out for a girls' night. And the kids went to bed early, and I texted my mate. I said, "Hey, come over. Kids are in bed. Wife's out. Netflix and chill, yeah." Yeah, I know what it means. Who don't? Like, clap if you know what it means. So you all know. You're not. Do you know what it means, sir? What is it? What is it, sir?
Is it like a pretense to a hookup?
It's pretense to a hookup. That's a really fancy way of saying fucking, really. Pretense to a hookup. Yeah, that's what it is. It's basically people.
Here he is.
Hey, Hey, Diana, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining the show.
My pleasure. I have not looked back at that set from about 5 years ago, I think. It's interesting actually watching that because Netflix and chill was kind of a thing where people were, a lot of people didn't know what it was, and then it went through a stage where I think a lot of people understood what it meant, and now I feel like people still use it incorrectly. Like people will say, "Come over Netflix and chill." Like, so it's kind of weirdly kind of gone, a full circle almost.
Yeah. No, well, this is way too deep for LinkedIn, but I had no, I don't want to go. I was going to share when my first Netflix and chill. It was last year.
Is that right? It's the first thought.
Peter, thank you for coming on the show. You've just finished a live show on TV probably 2 hours ago, and now you're here. Can I ask, who are you? Who is Peter Helliar?
Well, I first and foremost, I'm a dad of 3 beautiful boys. One nearly turning 18 in this pandemic, which is interesting, and doing his final year of school. A 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, but and a happily married man to my beautiful wife Bridge. But outside of that, I think of myself as a creator. Somebody who likes to. I've always believed in the power of ideas, and I've always, I was told quite early in my comedy career, Diana, that ideas are more important than punchlines, and that was the one bit of advice that I really took and ran with, and I think it was already speaking to me. I think I already kind of knew that to a degree, but to have somebody articulate to me that backstage at a comedy room, I was like, yeah, I completely get it. And so I've always just been about ideas, and I tell anyone who wants to listen, new comics, old comics, just have ideas for everything, have ideas for something you can put on LinkedIn, put on movie ideas, podcast ideas, comic strip, ideas, whatever it might be, not just about, performing routines on stage.
And I think that's proof with your show, How to Stay Married. Like you created that. That's, you could have just been a stand-up comedian, but you decided, I'm going to write a script and write episodes. And now you have 2 seasons of your own show on Channel 10, which I was a part of. So thank you so much.
You're a wonderful part of that, and I'm sure we'll discuss it even more throughout the episode. But it was really, and that came from that was How to Stay Married is a spin-off from a series I did, which you mentioned in the introduction, called It's a Date, and that was that was an anthology series about people dating and different dating experiences. And it's interesting, we were very close to actually that getting. It was being developed in the States, and for some reason we didn't quite get it made. But since then, there's been all very similar kind of shows about kind of anthology shows about dating. So I kind of kicked not myself, maybe other people that it didn't get done overseas. But there was an episode with myself and Lisa McCune, who's my partner, on-screen partner in How to Stay Married, and we just loved working together. And so a spin-off idea, which is a very simple idea. It's a marriage sitcom, but as you know, Diana, there are 1,000 marital sitcoms in the States and in Britain and around the world. But weirdly, it's really weird, in Australia, there really almost has not been a sitcom looking at marriage in our lifetime. It's the very few successful mainstream sitcoms have weirdly been involving widows, mainly men, all together now. Hey Dad, it's kind of slightly weird. So this is, as much as it's not a groundbreaking idea as such, it's actually new territory for Australian television comedy.
There you go. I didn't know that. Now thinking about it, I think Australia's made more like crime shows. If I think about it,
we have it, and a lot of reality television as well.
That's it. And you talked about great. You can just be a stand-up comedian, but you just need ideas. If you had to write a book about your life, what would the title of this book be called?
That's a very good. That's a very good. That's a very good question. It'll probably be. Let's talk about someone else. Because it's funny. I like talking about the craft, and I like talking about our industry and our lovely community that I feel very fortunate to be part of. But as soon as I start talking too much about myself, I get a bit, even though sometimes you get embarrassed with compliments, but it is nice to hear them later on. You kind of go, oh, that was nice. It was nice to hear that. And it's nice that they think that. But for me to kind of even imagine that there would be a memoir about myself is just too kind of, it gives me the wrong kinds of vibes.
Look, I'll write it for you. I'll write it for you.
Please do. You would do a great job. You would do a great job.
We're just going to acknowledge the people who are joining us and watching the show. We have here, we've got Sydney, we've got St Kilda, Melbourne. We've also got Turkey has joined in. Thanks for joining in. Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. Where else we've got here? Thanks for joining. Please ask any questions that you might want to ask. We've got Vegas. My God, Vegas is awake.
Oh, the party just got started.
Look, we've got some fans here.
Where's Strawny? I feel like I should explain that for those in Vegas, Cincinnati, Dubai.
Pennsylvania. Yes. Who's Strawny?
Strawny was and is a character that I came up with based on. Well, it's not based on anyone really. It's a character who is he was the last pick taken in the Australian Football League draft many years ago, and he could never get a game for Collingwood, the biggest club in the AFL, because he was too unfit. Obviously, I had to put on weight for that role. Yeah, and it became weirdly, even maybe a little bit bigger than cult-like. He said, I've had weird experiences with Strawny where I played in these actual legends games where retired legends of the sport would play a game of AFL, and I would actually play with them, which was both terrifying and exhilarating. Strawny opened the Brownlow medal one year, which is like, the Dally M, or, the highest medal in AFL, and they have a big ceremony, and Strawny walked out and opened it. So there's just lots of weird kind of things. He actually won an award at the Cannes Advertising Awards. So it's just, he's had a very bizarre kind of life.
Yeah. And for anyone who's asking what is the AFL, so Strawny is an avid Carlton supporter.
Collingwood.
But you are
I'm Collingwood too. It helps.
That's what I thought too. My friend I was messaging her said that you were a Carlton. I was like, no, I remember Strawny's Collingwood.
Your friend is trying to bring the SnortCast down by creating a wedge between us, Diana. That's what's happening there. I said on live TV tonight that Carlton is a putrid club, and I stand by that here on the SnortCast.
Well, I'm a Hawthorn supporter, but my sister married into a Collingwood family, and I lost her. So,
well, she's better off.
Thanks. That's what Jo Stanley says. She's a huge Collingwood supporter as well. I don't know where the comedy comes from that, but
well, and the thing is, your sister has been now. She's probably in a world of pain, where you have had the Hawthorn Football Club have had a glorious kind of recent history. Not in the last couple of years, but the last decade, you've won 5 flags. Yes. So anyway, your sister's debatable.
It is. And let's talk about comedy. So, what was the first memory of comedy in your life when you realized that this was something you really liked to do?
Yeah, I think I had cousins who were all older than me. I did have a cousin a similar age, but we lost him when I was 8. So all my cousins were either quite a bit younger or quite a bit older. And when I say quite a bit, like 4 years or so, but that felt like a long, a wide gap at that age. And I think and they were quite funny, and I think whenever I was able to make them laugh, it felt really good. Particularly, and the older I got, the wittier I got, I think, and I was able to they weren't laughing at me, they were laughing with me, and then I could kind of see they were kind of quite surprised with and how funny I was becoming. Comedy was in our family, was always, highly regarded. And whether it was what we watched on TV or the movies you watched, or just making each other laugh around the dinner table. So those were the seeds. And then I went to school and I started doing these speeches and writing books, and reading them in front of the class. And I remember getting some laughs with some of the books that I wrote. I started my own not production company, my own book publishing company called Better Books, and I had all these books. And there was one called Indiana Helliar. There was one called Buried Alive. There was one called Meet a Sports Star, where I won WrestleMania on page 1 and the NBA title on page 2. So after being recruited by Michael Jordan to weirdly play for the Boston Celtics, who I support to this day, against the LA Lakers, I'm not sure how that all came to be, but it was becoming reasonably clear when I was young that I was a funny kid, and then just started writing, performing my own kind of productions at high school, and kind of getting into trouble occasionally for them because they were a bit kind of risque. Yes. At an old boys' school, and yeah.
Wow, and you write children's books, don't you? You just recently released one.
Yeah, there's a series called Frankie Fish, which I've written, and there's I think the 6th book is about to come out, and the final book, book 7, will come out in March, and it's been one of my favorite things that I've done. It's comedy is great, as you know, Diana, and it's I love performing it, and I love the reaction you get from live audiences, and it's hard to compare anything to that. But I must say the love you get if you can write a good kids book, and the letters, the kind of letters I get and emails from parents who are quite emotional because they're like, I have not been able to get my kid to read, and Frankie Fish was the book that did that, and that's worth more to me than I think any kind of praise or thanks I've gotten for comedy. So it's been a really special series for me, and we're going to continue into different series after we finish Frankie Fish.
That is beautiful to hear. Like, I'm currently during this pandemic working with a primary school. I'm creating videos for them just because they're in remote learning, and it's kind of like trying to keep the community together. And I have to say, it's kept me youthful. It's like to be connected with children. So I totally hear when kids, send in a letter, or, when parents say, you're getting my kids to read, it actually just reinforces you that the work that you do is more than just comedy. It's for me, it's joy. So
yeah. Absolutely, and to get to see kids dress up as Frankie Fish or characters within the book for Book Week is one of my favourite things to see. So it's it's joyful.
That's beautiful. And who inspired you to get into comedy, like, or now, like, who drives you to keep doing the work that you do?
I think myself, to be honest. I think I'm my own self-motivator. But as far as who got me into, like, who are my heroes growing up, there's a TV show called The Big Gig. I'm not sure if you might be too young.
Years ago,
yeah. It was on the ABC in Australia, and it was live. It had a little live comedy. The Doug Anthony All-Stars, who became quite world famous, started there, and it was just live, dangerous television, and it was such a joy to watch. Then there were some sketch shows. Australia hasn't really produced many sketch shows for quite a few years, but there was Fast Forward and the Comedy Company. I really enjoyed, watching that. I did work experience at Fast Forward, so I got to sit in the seats watching like Magda Zabansky and Mark Downey and Michael Veitch and Steve Vizard be directed by Ted Emery and this rehearse for the live night. And I just sat there. Nobody really spoke to me. I don't think they really knew what to do with the work experience kid, to be honest. They just plunked me down, but it was perfect. I was just watching all this unfold, and it like now, particularly Magda is a friend. She's a really a beautiful friend of mine, and so it's kind of a pinch yourself kind of moment, and then the D-Gen, and who become Working Dog, still were big supporters of mine. And I still do Have You Been Paying Attention? And I go in there, and there's Rob Sitch and Santo and Tom Gleisner and Jane, and these are the people who I watched from The Late Show and then Frontline and then as far as overseas stuff, I love Richard Curtis and Blackadder and the Young Ones. And the sketch comedy shows coming out of England, a bit of Fry and Laurie, I loved, and out of the States, I love the sitcoms out of the States, particularly. I think the two that stand out growing up were, and this is 80s, I would say, Family Ties and Cheers. In fact, Cheers is the reason I love the Boston Celtics, because it was set in Boston, and but those are my two. There's so many TV shows I can mention, but those were the ones that stand out now.
What a nest. And when you said fast forward, that was for me too. I was quite young, but Eric Bana was on there, wasn't he? Fast forward?
Yeah. Well, fast forward became Full Frontal, and then there was a bit of a changeover of cast, but they just rebadged it, really. It was a similar kind of show. But Eric Bana was on that, and he was hilarious.
And look at him now.
Yeah, he's watching this, I'm sure. G'day, Eric.
That's it. People are saying, oh my God, memories. I grew up watching Fast Forward. And someone's written, I'm going to get Frankie Fish.
Yeah. You better. You got about 6 books to catch up on. It's really great. For those wondering, it's for, around 8 to 12, but I think it plays in a bit broader than that, to be honest. It's a really lovely book, and it's about friendship, but it's about a boy he finds a friend, and it's a time traveling element to it. It's kind of inspired. The inspirations are, I always say, The Magic Faraway Tree by Eden Blyton and Back to the Future. They're the two inspirations.
God, just hearing you just answer that question, it feels like you're inspired by. It's like it's a beautiful pool. Like it's not just one person, but it's a collection.
I mean, whether it's my music collection or the kind of films that I watch. In fact, I've just started the podcast, which I'll need to get you on, Diana. I'm about 14 episodes in. It's called You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. And I talk to people about a classic movie that they've never seen before. Ooh. And it's been such a joy to either watch a movie that I loved, but introduce my guests to this movie, like E.T. or a film like that. But also, there's been so many films that the reason I did this podcast, because people kept on saying, "Oh, you're a movie buff," but there are so many holes in my filmography that was getting a bit embarrassing. So there are movies like Thelma and Louise that I hadn't seen, and I watched that with a great American comedian called Alex Edelman. I watched Contagion recently with Will Anderson. I had seen that. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid I hadn't seen. I watched that, and it's a really lovely way of spending an hour with somebody and watching a film and kind of going, we're going to discuss this now. So it's fun. But to get that, so I got sidetracked. I think I have quite an eclectic, love. I love watching foreign language films, but I also love, a good blockbuster. I don't close myself off to any experience, and I think that's important. Sometimes I have queried that in my own mind, Diana, and thought maybe I should have had you get people who have really succeeded because they love noir films, and that's what they've gone for, or they love fantasy films, and they've succeeded because they love fantasy films. But I just have this kind of just love of lots of different types of stuff.
You and I are very similar. I just love a lot of things, and I feel like I've sidetracked from my stand-up because I've loved producing and creating so many things. It's very I feel like we've got more to talk about. But I do want to talk to you about your live shows. Rove was when, they had this variety show. I think it was Tuesday night. Is that
It was
right?
Tuesday nights for a while, and then it went to Sunday nights for it went for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think probably for 6 years it was Tuesday, and then the last 4 years it was Sunday nights.
What was it like to do Rove back in 1999 when you were?
Well, I started stand-up comedy in 96.
Wow.
And I met Rove in the rooms. We were just doing stand-up, and we just connected straight away. And then he started doing a show on community television, and he asked me if I wanted to, be a guest on that, and I said, of course. And we I sat at the desk, and we just spoke shit for a while in front of a very small studio audience, and other times I'd go out and shoot a sketch and kind of bring it to him and show the sketch, and that's really what we ended up doing for the next 10 years on like a major television network in Australia. So it was an incredible experience. We went to Channel 9 first. We were there for a year, and on late night, so like 11:30, which if you're in America, that's an institution that's been happening for years. But in Australia, that time slot just doesn't exist. Everyone, it almost gets switched off, and the test pattern goes on. But we were able to kind of have this, these kind of four of us with no television experience outside of community television, but just given the keys to the studio, and it was so incredible, Diane, for me. And I was probably the most prolific writer out of us, and I would just write sketch after sketch after sketch, and then and Channel 9 at that stage had like the old, almost like Californian bungalow kind of setup, like on set. So you kind of would go, and I would write a sketch, and then the next day I'd walk across to the studio, and there would be a set built, and it was just like, this is amazing. I can just write something, and then other people are going to take it away and make it better, and I love that, and I still get that feeling with How to Stay Married, and even the project where I think of an idea and somebody will go and build some graphics for it, or How to Stay Married. There'll be wardrobe and set design, make everything better, and it's just, that's what I love about the collaboration of all the projects that I've done.
Yeah, it's like I felt that when I walked onto set for How to Stay Married. I just remember walking to the crew and the cast, and it just felt everything was held. It was just beautiful to see how everyone's work was making this dream happen. And that's the ultimate, as a creative, like stand up, I have to say, is a very lonely job when you go home, and thank goodness you've got a beautiful wife and 3 kids to hold you, But for most of us comedians, and I'm still 35 and young and beautiful, you go, you do your stand up, you have a drink, and you go home, and it's you've got to transition from that lonely space when you had people laughing at your jokes to then now just going, I'm okay with no laughter and I'm loved. It's a massive transition. But yeah, what I just remember having such a fulfilling experience on your set, and I just remember leaving going, I need to do something like this. Like, it was really inspiring. And
I don't take it for granted that I get to make a show like that, and it's really rare in Australia, and I also don't take for granted the job that you did, because you were with us for a day and you came in and you smashed it, and it's really hard and it's intimidating to come in halfway through a shoot where everyone's kind of been together and everyone's kind of become close and you're a bit of a family, and it's hard to come in and hit your spots and deliver your lines and kind of nobody wants to hold up shooting, and you were great. And I was directing that episode as well. I had some help because I was in so many of the scenes. I asked one of the other directors to come in and keep an eye on things, and once I set up the shots, they could just take over and make sure they were done. But you were like really amazing, and I hope you felt the safety net that we provided, and even when we're developing the character, you had kind of great ideas, and it all kind of came about because I met you on the project.
Yeah. And great segue. We're just going to show a little clip of us on the project.
Yeah.
Hey, this is
We got to snort. You wrote a short story a while back called 5 Ways to Disappoint Your Vietnamese Mother.
Yes.
Is a number one way to create an online series depicting her? Is that number one?
No, number one was to not be a doctor and be an actor or be a comedian.
What was that? Yeah, what was that conversation like?
She would walk out of my shows during intervals. Yeah, twice. High school production, university production, would walk out. And it took about a good 8 years for me to heal from that.
It's so great. It makes me miss the studio audience listening to that as well. We haven't had a studio audience since about February. So it almost feels like a long time ago, but yeah. So you smashed your spot, and it's because when I am involved with the casting of the shows that I work on, and not that we have a casting agent, but I'm always looking out for interesting new people, and I just it might have been the snort that got you. I thought anyone who this embraces a snort, is welcome on my set anytime, and so when kind of a role came up, I was just like, Diana could do it. You didn't even audition, did we? Did we get you to audition? No, it was just a straight offer, which I love doing as well. I love kind of seeing somebody, and I've done a lot with stand-up comedians where I just haven't. I've just said to our producers and even a director, they're not auditioning. I'm backing them in, and let's just, they're funny. They've proven what they can do, and let's just get on with it.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was great fun, and it's always an honor when someone calls you up and says, "Hey, no audition, you've got the role." It's a massive honor. 15 years into my career to get someone to call up my agent and say that. It feels great.
Yeah, well, and you deserve it, and it's. And I know what that feeling must be like. I don't think it's ever happened to me, but I imagine it feels very good. But it's it's important to just back people in, and yeah, I mean there are so many different ways, and sometimes I've really wanted people to get to the part, and they've had to audition. It's just for whatever reason, maybe the director wants has somebody else in mind. And then so it's not an insult to be asked to audition at all, but I just think it's nice whenever we get the chance to kind of say, nah, it's theirs.
And we're just going to drop it in because I got inspired to do this SnortCast during a pandemic. I started this in July because I just saw that Melbourne Comedy Festival. You had a show for Comedy Festival that got cancelled.
Yeah, that's right.
How during this pandemic, how have you had light in your life? Because I know that you've still had work with the project, but how have you kept yourself joyous in this time period?
I think it's funny. I've looked at this pandemic as I've compartmentalized it from the horror show that is what's happening and around the world and to the economy and in aged care and I fear for my parents and but then I have to compartmentalize that. That's happening out there, and then I have to think about my own little village here involving a population of 5, 2 if you include the dog and the cat, and we've actually had a really a good year. I think we've grown even closer, all of us. We've done things, my wife and I started doing pub crawls around the house, which we kind of put on Instagram, and they've turned into like trips around the world. So like we will go last week, we went to Italy, and the week before was France, and we just like dress up different rooms in the house and some dodgy photoshopping going on. Because I released a book with my wife a few weeks ago called Tripping with Kids. It's a travel book about traveling with your kids because we've done a bunch of holidays with them, and we want to encourage parents not to put off traveling with your kids. Like just do it, And we worked really hard on it last year. My wife in particular worked really hard on it, and we had no idea we'd be releasing it in a global pandemic. So it's not ideal, but and we considered pushing it back to not release during this time, but we just thought it's really important to dream and plan, and that's it's always been, as soon as we decide we're going on holiday, the planning becomes part of the fun as well. So we decided it was important to give people that kind of, that light at the end of the tunnel. So we've done that. It's funny, Diana, I kind of really went, when we first went in the shutdown, I really went hard on, I made sure the podcast was getting out, which I'd been promising myself to do for years. I started doing the Strawny character online, which I hadn't done for years. Just because I actually felt a duty. I thought the one thing I can do is use what I can kind of give, which is comedy and content, and just put it out into the world. Like I just felt, and even How to Stay Married season 2, we actually released it earlier. In fact, we put it online for a couple of weeks on 10 Play, and then it went free to air a few weeks later. And when Channel 10 came to ask me about it, I just said, yeah, of course, that's a great idea. Like, I feel like my job as a comedian in these times is to provide content, and hopefully, I'm not a frontline worker. I'm not in hospitals doing that kind of, really life-saving work. But, this is the job that I've chosen. The one thing I can do to help is provide content. And I'm always saying to people, are you helping or are you hindering? Like, we all have a duty to help, and that's what makes me angry when when the anti-maskers and people who are just getting in the way of what is mostly a great community response to a terrible situation.
Oh,
Sorry,
it's topical. We're in it. I think the thing that's so I can't speak English. This pandemic isn't just in Australia; it's around the world. And we've seen every country do their own thing. But for me, as a Melburnian, and you said it before, your duty of care is to your family of 5 and your 2 pets. And my duty of care is to my mother, who's in her 60s, and I've got a new niece who's only a month old. And I hear that. And another, I think we need another interview to talk about it. But I totally hear it, that we do have a duty of care, and what is the most important thing we can do right now. We're going to drop into another topic, which is, talking about diversity in comedy. You've been doing this for 20 or so years. Have you seen a change from when you first started doing lineup shows to, like, are you still doing lineup shows now as a comedian, or it's more TV work now?
Yeah, I still do lineup shows, and usually to prepare, more drop-in spots or headline. I'll be honest, sometimes I get, I don't get there for the start of the night and watch the whole night. I'll maybe I'm running from the project to get to the club, but I'll always pay attention to who's on. And I have seen a change. It used to be a whole lot more white and blokey. That's not to say that it's still not, largely the case, but I think it's a lot more diverse. It used to be strange if you saw like a female comedian on stage, and then the MC would come out and introduce like another female comedian and be like, what's going on here? Kitty Flanagan did a great routine about it. I think we're kind of saying, like, it's almost like, the first one you kind of go, yeah, and the second female comes out and you're like, the audience is like, what, is there some kind of like feminist convention going on here? What's going on? And I feel that's gone, but I mean, you could probably, speak more in your experience of, how, I'm interested to see how, what you think in your time, whether it be kind of watching comedy and then kind of, being on stage and performing it, how you see that it's changed.
Well, look, I'm a baby compared to, you're a veteran, you've been working it, and I've this is probably my 4th year doing stand-up. So this is young. Like, do you remember your 4th year of stand-up?
Oh, I remember the I remember the kind of yearly. I mean, the 4th year I got the Rove opportunity really early. So I started in 96 and I got the Rove pilot in early 99.
Yeah.
So that's when I did a timeline. That's kind of what I was doing, and you're getting the TV opportunities and you've already done a show. You did the show and guested on How to Stay Married but what about television then? Do you see? And there's obviously a lot of we're coming from a long way back, I feel. But have you seen, even from your life growing up watching TV, Australian TV, are we getting any better?
There is progress, but because this is my 15th year as a performer, I want more. That makes sense. Like, there's a drive in me. Like, I want more. So that there's this tendency to go, well, I better go to America then, because at least there's a bigger pool of work. But yeah, in Melbourne with the lineup shows, I read Ali Wong's book, and she talked about women going to do lineup shows, and there's an extra security level where they have to walk out at night after the show and get home. Like, there's another protection layer. But to do comedy, you need to do lineup shows to get your craft better. And so I kept hearing that, like, you can't really call yourself a comedian if you're not testing your work. Like, if you're not bombing, you're not really playing, are you? That's the joy of being a stand-up comedian. You have to play. So I started a lineup show called the Snort Cast. And my mission is that it's 50% men and 50% women. So, when you said Kitty Flanagan going, the second woman's it's a female convention, I just wanted to shift that gear and say, yeah, what if you could have, 2 men, 2 women, 2 men, 2 women on a lineup instead of that token woman or that token Asian. So I'm hoping that work that I'm doing is evidence that you can get an audience. And I've sold out shows with that kind of lineup. So I want that to unlock from people, just to break that lock, that diversity is hard. It's just that you need to work harder to make it happen.
Yeah, and it is hard, but it's so worth it, and it's as hard as you are prepared to make it. When we did It to Date, like I said, it's an anthology show, so we went for 2 seasons. So every episode there was 2 dates, so 4 people, 4 times 8. And then we had all the supporting cast to be waiters, and there'll be like ex-girlfriends or partners and parents involved in particular storylines. I think we cast over 2 seasons 300 roles, and we just made the choice that we both want, but we also need. We have a duty to make sure this isn't a white Anglo cast all the way through. There's always going to be a good representation of male female because of the nature of the show, but also to have gay characters and it was kind of really important to us. And then when we did How to Stay Married, it was funny because we inherited. Because there's a spin-off series, we inherited, me and Lisa being a married couple, and we had our kids who weren't seen in the series, but obviously that we wanted a resemblance. And the other main character is a brother, and so it was kind of like, okay, that we are a very white show from the get-go. So we tried to find. Anyway, I think we did pretty good in the first series, better in the second season, and we're actually. At the moment, developing a 3rd season, and I think we're even taking a further step. Even in the writers' room, I think that's important. The first series was written by me and like mostly me, and then 2 other white male writers, and then we made that adjustment in the second to balance up the gender. But there was only one BIPOC writer in that room, in the development room, And then so this year, where I think we've got more female writers and 2 writers of color in the room as well, and it just opens up the life experience in the room, and a great example of, in fact, was when we wrote the episode that How to Say Married was based on. That the corresponding date featured Dave Lawson, who's a wonderful actor, comedic actor in Australia, and we just wanted, we just decided this other character, the woman he's on a date with, is going to be Asian. We just decided that. I think we had a few other actors worked out who we were going to bring in, and so we just thought we don't have Asian representation here. So we just said, and sometimes it can feel weird even saying that out loud sometimes, because people are like on eggshells, and that's what they're thinking on eggshells. Is it racist to say we want an Asian to play this role? And it got tough. Like, we couldn't quite find the right person, and we ended up putting Poe, who's a celebrity chef. She had auditioned for something, and we heard through the grapevine that she didn't get the role, but she was actually really good. So we gave her the role, and for me, the real learning experience was by having her in the room, and we wrote that show by getting the performers in the room before we started writing the scripts. Mm-hmm. So we would have an idea of, this is what we kind of want the episode to be about, or your date to be about, but you can choose your character name if you want. You can let us do it, but you can choose your name. If there's any experience you want to bring to us, then we will, hopefully filter that through the scripts and have that, and we got so much amazing stuff from all the actors. John Wood, who's a legend of Australian television, has worked in this industry for 50 years, said he's never worked like that before, and it was one of the great joys that he had. But Poe was able to bring stuff about her experience, and it was all her suggestion. And there's this great scenes in it about when she finds out that her boyfriend has only had like Asian ex-girlfriends, and she never knew that. And she just kind of gave us this great kind of almost monologue about what that meant to her, and it was hilarious. But we would never have gone there if she wasn't in the room. We would never have gone, let's write about that. We were able to go further, even if we kind of thought we could maybe get a reference in here, or or this play with it a little bit. I don't think we would have, but Poe was able to kind of speak from experience, and it just made that episode just really kind of cook, I think.
Beautiful. And she's been back on Channel 10 on MasterChef again, so she's had a bit of revival.
Absolutely. And you can see, if you want to talk about diversity in Australia, and I completely, it is the progress has been way too slow. But if you look at MasterChef Series 1 and the latest series, it was like completely, different. The representation was much higher, but we need to make sure it's not just about cooking shows, and it needs to be about the whole breadth of entertainment.
Yeah. We've got another question, because this show is predominantly for LinkedIn people who are watching your show. Thank you so much for tuning in. What would be your tip to someone who wanted to use comedy in their storytelling?
Oh, I think it's essential for a start. Like, I think even movies and TV shows that you love that you would not consider a comedy, they all have comedy in it. So I think comedy is the most efficient way of showing our humanity. I think so. I would say, try to draw from your own experiences, but don't be limited by that. Don't, there's the whole write what you know, and I've done a fair bit of that, and I'm pretty keen to move on in, future projects to stuff I haven't experienced. I've done the It's a Date, which is about kind of looking for love, and I've done How to Say Married, which is about, domestic life, and I'm pretty keen to start exploring more uncomfortable areas, or areas that just aren't, reflective of my own life. I think whatever you're writing, whether it's a gritty drama or a historical epic, you know, like there's got to be comedy, you know, or humor, or whatever you want to call it, in it. So yeah, it's not. It shouldn't be an afterthought, and it shouldn't be something you consider doing. It should be something that it needs to be in there.
Yeah, and I spoke to Bev Kalick about it, and we said, we just said that comedy is a superpower. It's amazing what you can do with it when you can hold a room to hold their breath until you let that punchline out and they release. It is a way to catch people. And
I one of the things I think I do well as a writer, and it is I can, and I love the changing of a gear, you know, like to go from a dramatic moment to undercut it with a something funny, or the other way around, where it's something funny, then it's that's kind of, you know, implode it with something dramatic that happens. I mean, you want to kind of start most scenes, however you start a scene, you kind of don't want to finish it with that same vibe. You know, you want to kind of have that growth with every scene. So whether if it starts funny, yeah, it's the old plus, negative plus. You know, it's so yeah, it's not that you want to undercut every moment, every dramatic moment with a joke. I think that's a mistake as well. And you know, Hannah Gadsby speaks really well about what that can do to a moment. But yeah, I think, you know, comedy should be living and breathing in your projects, every project.
Beautiful. Now, Peter, we've got a lot of questions for you.
Sure.
Peter, you're a very funny guy. Have always loved your work? I love to know, though, what makes you an optimistic?
Well, the hard truth is that I have, if I wasn't, and I've been so fortunate, like I have a beautiful family. I've got to touch wood. You know, if I wasn't an optimistic, I would be a bastard. You know, I've got no right not to be optimistic. So I'm fortunate that I've had people who have championed me to help me get to places. And I say that acknowledging also it's hard work, and it's that I've put in. And I think I'm a good person to work with. I try to be. So I've got no reason not to be optimistic. And I think I've always been optimistic. I was raised watching, through my own choice, really, a lot of TV and a lot of movies. And you know what, Diane, I kind of believed in them. I feel like I've lived in a bit of a fairy tale, you know, like real world stuff, like, you know, organizing taxes and, the stuff that, you know, people have to do. I kind of, you know, I get them done, or my wife is, you know, happy enough to do them. But I got to live in this fairyland between my head, you know, between my ears most of the time, of like just thinking of, you know, projects and ideas, and it all comes back to ideas. I think I just think of, if you're thinking of ideas, it's just like, oh, you know, and then my biggest fear is actually not realizing some of these ideas. That I'm gonna go with too many ideas left on the table.
Oh, that's my fear too. Like when they don't come alive, then they're stuck in here. That's something wrong about creators, I think. Another question we've got is, Peter, will you accept the proposal for not a comedian but scary movie character?
I would love to. I would love to play a scary movie character.
Like a scary character, who would you love to play?
I don't know. I'd like to be challenged, into how people may, you know, like most of the acting work I've done, I have written. Yeah, like there's been a few times when I've been offered a role and I haven't been able to take it, sadly, because I've been, you know, I can't. My schedule is, I need to be on the project, or, but I just would like, you know, I'd take up the opportunity, of course, to you know, if somebody thought that I could play I was offered a role in Underbelly, actually, but it was of a guy who was, I forget which character it was, but it was a guy who was like like 30 years older than me. And it was mildly insulting when I got it, but
We've got Irene saying, I'll have to buy books for my kids, Peter. Kids need excitement and humor during this pandemic. Peter's the funniest and most down-to-earth guy. Look, this is becoming your resume right now.
oh, this is so sweet. This is a nice little boost on a Wednesday night.
Yes. A question I've got is, what do you do to trigger your comic spirit when you're trying to create a stand-up show? And do you get frozen? That's a good question.
It is a good question. I use booze to trigger my comedic spirit mostly. Listen, you can get stuck. I always find it interesting when I'm writing a show, because most shows go for, our shows don't, as you know, go for an hour. That's what you're aiming for, in festivals. And it's really weird. And I usually do a show every 2 years. I've started doing that over the last 6 years or so. I just feel like it gives me, well, one, because I'm doing, they've got the books and the project and some other stuff. So to do a good show, I feel like I need 2 years for myself to evolve, but also the world to change a little bit, and it's quite interesting when you do a show every 2 years, you realize how much the world has changed. I remember doing a show, kind of in between same-sex marriage getting up in Australia but before Donald Trump, and it was kind of like this kind of, so the next show I did, it was like, we'd kind of stopped speaking about same-sex marriage because it was up, and we're all, it's okay, let's move on, but now we're dealing with Donald Trump, and it's just like, it's crazy, it's crazy how much the world does change when we're not really looking.
Yeah, it is, and we're in it.
But I'd also say if you're trying to get a show going, just get up on stage, and as I think you mentioned earlier, when you mentioned the lineup shows, you just got to get on stage, and it's the only time you can really trial it, and yeah, it's all stage time.
Yeah. We've got a question about your movie buff. Do you watch K-drama?
No.
Korean drama?
Is it Korean drama? No, I would love to hear some recommendations.
Oh, my WhatsApp group with my girlfriends from high school is like rampant with Korean drama. I'll send you the list.
Obviously I've seen Parasite like 5 times now. I watched it with all my kids. That was amazing. And actually, I didn't watch it with my youngest. I remember I was almost going to watch it with my youngest. And I remember that one scene on the couch where it gets a bit hot and heavy on the couch. So.
Yes.
I did watch during the pandemic. I've been watching, having movie nights with my kids. Sometimes it's just the older kids, and we've watched like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, and sometimes it's with my youngest, and we'll watch like Taika Waititi's Boy. We watched a lot of Wes Anderson films, and the first one I watched was Rushmore with him, and I thought, it's just about a kid at school. I really forgot how many references there were to hand jobs in that in that film. So I had to. It was an interesting conversation afterwards.
We've got 2 more questions. What are the best traits to follow to start acting and writing future new comedy or television would be? So what would be best traits? That's the question.
It's a good question, Dusty. I think the one word there that stands out is writing. I think that, and you know this, as well as anyone, Diana, like that sometimes it comes down to creating your own work, and there's never been an easier time. Not to say that it's easy, but there's never been an easier time to at least be able to film something, on with your phone, or there's lots of different ways, and I feel like there's a bigger community now. Or they're easier to find. It's easier to find your people, I think, now. So find your people and try to get involved with the community. You don't have to do stand up to get into comedy writing. I work with a lot of people, comedy writers who are not comedians. Stand up comedians, but just I would say read scripts. Like make that part of your thing. Actually, kind of read screenplays, successful screenplays. Start doing that. So you just have an idea of pacing and how scripts work, and just be bold in your ideas. Like I said, How to Say Married is not a groundbreaking idea, and it's probably it may be the last of that kind of show that gets made in Australia, to be honest. But I think the next kind of ideas that I want to do. I want it to be bigger and bolder ideas. I think I'm working on something with somebody at the moment, and it started off as a nice, gentle idea that I think there's definitely comedy scope in it. But I think we're just discussing the idea of like, what if we just turn this on its head and it became something completely not what we think it is? And I think it's really exciting to explore those ideas. And one of the most exciting parts of any writing is that development stage where the show could be anything. At this stage, it could be absolutely anything. And Seth MacFarlane, who wrote Family Guy, kind of speaks about how you're in a lot of comedy rooms, and they're great places to be, comedy rooms. Everyone's very funny and you're making each other laugh, and then a joke gets inappropriate, more inappropriate, and then they kind of come back. But it's like the most hilarious is up here, and then they kind of somebody go, we can't do that, so let's not bring it back down to here. And his attitude is, no, you always go for that one. That's the one. Now, Family Guy is not for everyone, and it's certainly not exactly how we do things at How to Stay Married, but it's a nice thought.
Yeah. And we've got a question from Kiki. How are you going with homeschooling, Dad?
Well, we call it remote learning. Every time I say homeschooling on TV, I get some feedback from people saying there's a difference between homeschooling and remote learning. So homeschooling is when you are taking on all the responsibility of the education, and remote learning is obviously when they are on Zoom with the school. So we're doing pretty good with remote learning. My oldest is in year 12. Obviously, it's a big year for him. Yeah, he's a bit more of an introvert, actually. So I think it's weirdly suited him. I think having boys or kids the age of mine, 11, 15, 18, is a different experience to having toddlers. I've got some friends who have, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and that's a completely different experience than the reasonably calm kind of nights that we're having. Yeah, it's all right.
And my last question to you is, what's on your journey planner? I know you've got the project on during the week, but what else are you working on?
Working on How to Stay Married Series 3. So it's not. We basically will give them an outline of how we think the series will play out, and I'm outlining Series 1. Episode 1 tomorrow. That's what I'm doing for the next couple of days. And then based on those kind of things, they will then, commission. We had a great result with this series. It was, ratings were great. It was, really well received. And so we expect it to happen, but there are crazy times at the moment, so anything can happen. And the more I'm loving doing the podcast, and you must come on, Diana. I love to know what classic movie you are embarrassed that you haven't seen. Is there one that comes to mind?
Oh no, not one at the moment. I can't watch scary movies.
Well, maybe you should just watch one for me.
No,
I've come on the SnortCast. Maybe you could watch, Nightmare on Elm Street or one of the Scream movies.
I don't think I've watched that. I can't watch it. My heart. I feel like I'm having a heart attack. Like, I'm the most. Like, if you've seen Monica Seles on the tennis court playing tennis, that's me watching a scary movie. Like, I'm in sounds all over the place.
I thought it might be fun to get you to watch a scary movie, but after hearing you say that, it would just actually be quite cruel. So maybe don't. But get back to me on a movie that you haven't seen.
It'd be cool for watching it, listening to it. That's what will happen.
So there's that, and there's just some series that I want to help people get made. I think that's what I want to also start moving into more. That not shows that are featuring me at all. And there's a nice idea that we're kind of about to start pitching around, which is not a it's not scripted. It's an interesting kind of it's not reality, but it involves people getting out of their comfort zone in a pretty interesting way, and I'm really excited by that idea, actually.
Love it. And speaking of the devil, Penny Brown, Star Wars, she wrote.
Can I explain? Penny is a wonderful producer on How to Stay Married, and she's awesome. And we, I'm a Star Wars fanatic, and and we wrote an episode that had so many Star Wars references in it, like, you know, my character is going to be going off to the new Star Wars film with my daughter, and I kind of, part of it is that I realized my daughter doesn't like Star Wars as much as I think she does, and so we had the name for the new film, and it was going to be based on it was going to be a standalone Star Wars film featuring Lobot, who's like a minor character from Empire Strikes Back, and and somebody made the mistake of not a mistake, but we had to do it like legally, kind of just check it off legally, and they came back saying you cannot do this and you cannot do this, cannot do this. So Penny had to you know, trickily kind of navigate the legal elements to it with my wishes of how much Star Wars I could cram in to that. So that was in episode 1 of series 2 of How to Stay Married. Yeah.
And you know, she's a good producer when she's able to do that. So thank you.
She is. She's one of the best.
There you go. And Peter, thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much. That flew by.
Oh, well, it was my longest chat I've ever had on the show. So
I feel sorry if I spoke for too long. I kind of, you know.
No, we've had so many questions tonight. So thank you so much for joining the show. Thanks for allowing me to be part of your journey. It's been so wonderful since the project to How to Stay Married, and you're now on my show. So,
well, this is the thing. Yeah, this is the one that I'm, you know, most proud of. Can I do a snort?
Mine's organic. It's a fake.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't feel right. You're right. It doesn't feel right when you're just doing it. Sorry, I apologize for that. What a terrible way to end. You know, I'm sorry. As soon as I heard it, I thought that's not what that is. My mum's a snorter, and it brings me so much joy. It really does.
No, it brings me joy that I could bring you joy. So, you know, it's a two-way street here. Thank you so much for joining, and we will all see you all next week. Thanks for everyone for tuning in from Facebook and LinkedIn. We will see you next week for our next interview. And before we go, we'll have an outro music, but I've got to do it because I'm producing this show. So here we go.
Yeah, baby.